Hello, everyone. In Chapter 2, we will get an overview of various project methodologies and the processes in those methodologies. Our learning objectives for this chapter are to understand project methodologies based on PMI's PMBOK and based on Prince2. We will also compare two different approaches for system development lifecycle. The two approaches are waterfall and agile. And lastly, we will look at the learning cycle approach for solving problems. Let's start by some definitions. The project lifecycle is what happens on the project from its beginning to its end. It includes all the stages and phases that the project goes through. Each phase produces a series of alternatives that will be used in the subsequent phases. This is an example of a project lifecycle and its phases. In the initiation phase, when we start the project, we define project goals and put together a business case for why we need to do the project. In the planning phase, we finalize the scope and develop plans for managing all aspects of the project, including scope, cost, schedule, and quality. In the execution phase, we execute the plans that we developed in the previous phase. And in the closing phase, we evaluate the project. Now, let's take a look at the level of resources and expenditures over the life cycle. As you can see, most of the resources will be used during the execution phase. So it makes sense to ensure that planning is done thoroughly so the execution phase is planned and executed without any delays or any changes during execution. Now let's look at the risk. The risk associated with the project is continually reduced as we address the unknowns of the project. So it's the highest at the beginning of the project and it's minimal when we're finishing the project. On the other hand, the cost of any changes that we make to the project progressively gets more and more costly because changes create rework of some of the efforts done to that point. That is the reason to make sure that issues are addressed during the planning phase when the costs of changes are minimal. At the end of each phase, the key deliverables of a project need to be reviewed. These are referred to as phase exit or stage gates. At each of these gates, the review committee can either approve moving to the next phase, require additional work on deliverables before moving forward, or kill the project, stop the project. Fast tracking is starting the next phase of the project before approval is obtained for the completion of the current phase of the project. The purpose of this is to reduce the project schedule. Overlapping of phases, however, can be risky and should be done when the additional risk to the project is deemed acceptable for the schedule reduction. that is gained. Let's look at these phases in a bit more detail. The first phase is when we define what the business objectives are and what success looks like when the project is complete. It is important to clearly define the business value of the project, which will drive the focus of the rest of the project. Furthermore, in this phase, we identify the alternatives that would allow the organization to meet its goal. The costs and benefits, as well as feasibility and risk of each alternative are analyzed. Based upon these analyses, a specific alternative is recommended for further planning. Finally, the project's goal and analysis of alternatives that support the goals are summarized in a deliverable called the business case. In the plan phase, we establish key project objectives for the entire project: scope, schedule, budget, and quality. These objectives support the project's goals by defining what work needs to be completed, when it needs to be completed, how much it will cost to complete, and what is required for the work to be acceptable to the stakeholders. We will also determine the resources that are required to execute and control the project. In the work I did in benchmarking IT projects, we established statistical models that correlated the performance of projects based on the completeness of the work that was done during the planning phase. During planning, we determine the resources that are needed to complete the project work, such as people, facilities, and technology. We also need to establish controls to ensure that the project goals and objectives are being met and resources are used effectively and efficiently. In addition, risk, change, and communication among the project stakeholders all must be proactively planned for the project. In the execute phase of the project, we concentrate on design, development, and delivery of the project's product, service, or system. Moreover, the controls defined in planning phase allow the project stakeholders to compare the project's planned progress with the actual progress in terms of the work being completed on time, within budget, and within quality standards, so as to achieve the business value envisioned for the project. At the end of this phase, the team implements or delivers a completed product, service, or information system to the organization. The last phase ensures that all of the work is complete as agreed by the team and the sponsor and other stakeholders. However, the project and the project team should be evaluated during a post-mortem review to determine whether the project goals defined in the initial phase was achieved and also if there are any best practices based on experiences or lessons learned should be documented and made available for future projects. The Project Management Institute, PMI, publishes a set of practices and principles in the project management body of knowledge, which is usually referred to as PMBOK. These practices are grouped in 10 knowledge areas. These areas include management of scope, time, cost, quality, resources, communication, risk, procurement, and stakeholder, as well as integration management, which focuses on coordinating all these plans and develop the execution and control process. So let's look at these 10 areas. Scope management provides assurances that the project's work is defined accurately and completely, and it's completed as planned. In addition, scope management includes ways to ensure that proper scope change procedures are in place. Time management is important for developing, monitoring, and managing project schedule. It includes identifying the project phases and activities and then estimating, sequencing, and assigning resources for each activity to ensure that the project's scope and objectives are met. Cost management assures that project's budget is developed and the project is completed within the approved budget. Quality management focuses on planning, developing, and managing a quality environment that allows the projects to meet stakeholders' needs or expectations. Human resource management focuses on creating and developing the project team, as well as understanding and responding appropriately to the behavioral side of the project management, the people side of the project management. Communication management entails communicating timely and accurately the information about the project to the project's stakeholders. Project risk management is concerned with identifying and responding appropriately to risks that can impact the project. Projects often require resources such as people, hardware, software, etc. that are outside the organization. Procurement management makes certain that these resources are acquired properly. Stakeholder management focuses on identifying project stakeholders to better understand their expectations or interests, and then developing appropriate strategies for communicating and managing project conflicts. The PMBOK guide defines process as a set of interrelated actions and activities performed to achieve a pre-specified product, result, or service. In other words, a process is something you do to achieve a result. Processes are integral parts of our project. They support all of the activities necessary to plan, create, and manage all of project activities. PMBOK has 5 process groups. Conceptualize and initialize process group is focused on starting or initiating a project. And once commitment is obtained, the planning process group starts to develop and maintain a workable plan to support the project's overall goals. Executing process group focuses on coordinating people and other resources to execute the plan. Monitoring and controlling process group assures proper control and reporting mechanisms are in place so that progress can be monitored and problems can be identified and appropriate actions can be taken when necessary. Closing process group provides closure in terms of a formal acceptance that the project and its deliverables have been completed satisfactorily. PMBOK is not the only methodology for project management. Another project methodology that is used by the UK government and others is called PRINCE2. The aim of PRINCE2 is to ensure that projects are well thought out at the beginning, well managed throughout, and organized until the end. Let's look at some of the unique aspects of PRINCE2. The system development lifecycle consists of a series of sequential phases or stages that an IT system goes throughout its useful life. The SDLC has 5 phases. The planning stage involves identifying and responding to a problem or opportunity and incorporates the project management and system development processes and activities. Here, a formal planning process ensures that the goals, scope, budget, schedule, technology, and system development processes, methods, and tools are in place. The analysis phase integrates the problem or opportunity more fully. The specific needs and requirements for the new system are identified and documented during this phase. During the design phase, the project team uses the requirements and the to-be logical models created during the analysis phase as input for designing the architecture to support the new information system. This architecture includes the network design, hardware configuration, databases, user interfaces, and application programs. Maintenance and support phase involves the ongoing support for the system. Changes to the system in terms of maintenance and enhancement are often requested to fix any discovered bugs within the system or add any feature that were not incorporated into the original design or to adjust to the changing business environment. So how is project lifecycle tied to the system development lifecycle? While projects follow a project lifecycle, the development of a new product or service or information system follows a product lifecycle. The most common product lifecycle in IT is the system development lifecycle, SDLC, which represents the sequential phases or stages of product or information system throughout its useful life. The project lifecycle, PLC, focuses on phases, processes, tools, knowledge, and skills for managing a project, while the system development lifecycle, SDLC, focuses on creating and implementing the project's product, which is the information system. The SDLC is part of the project lifecycle because many of the development activities occur during the execution phase of the PLC. The last 2 phases of the PLC, the close project and evaluate project, occurs after the delivery of the product or the information system. Waterfall is a structured approach to system development and has been around since the 1960s when large mainframe applications were developed. Winston Royce, a computer scientist, is attributed with proposing the model called waterfall when he published a paper called Managing the Development of Large Software Systems in 1970. Waterfall is a metaphor for cascading of activities from one phase to the next, where one phase is completed before the next phase is started. Agile approach is an iterative approach to develop a system in iterations. In each iteration, the team works on the most important and valuable feature of the system. When a usable version of the product is available, it is released to the users, while the project team, works on the next set of high-value features. The hybrid approach combines the waterfall and agile approaches. For example, in a hybrid approach, the project team may develop the general requirements for the entire system, but chunk up the system in smaller releases. The waterfall model stresses a sequential and logical flow of software development activities from one phase to another. Also, as issues are found in one phase of development, the team may need to go back one or more phases to rework the deliverables of those phases. Here are some of the advantages of using waterfall. It allows to plan each phase in detail so that the project schedule and budget can be estimated for all tasks defined in each phase. In theory, the project will be completed on time and within budget if each phase is completed according to the estimate. A structured approach is suitable when developing large, more complex systems where a large part of the system has to be developed before it is useful. Of course, the assumption and hope in this approach is that the requirements defined in the early phases do not change very much over the remainder of the project. Because this approach will provide a solid structure that can minimize wasted efforts, the waterfall model may work well when the project team is inexperienced or less technically competent. So what are the disadvantages of waterfall approach? The waterfall approach takes long time to release a useful system, and it does not embrace the idea that changing requirements is inevitable. Inexperienced developers often have the false belief that if they ask the users what they want, they can collect a set of clear and accurate and complete set of requirements. In reality, most users don't know or are unable to articulate their needs early on in the project. And if they do, those requirements will most likely change later on. Users tend to be involved at three main points during the waterfall project. Uh, when they are needed to define the requirements and features and functionality of the software, when users ask to change for changes to those requirements, and when at the end of the project, when the software is delivered. Many times, the fact that users are not continually involved with the development of the system results in a strained relationships between users and developers. Users may not have articulated everything they wanted it, and developers become resistant to making any changes later on. Adding new requirements or changing software that has already been written adds to the schedule and cost of projects. As a result, the project team may decide to deliver a system that does not meet all the users' needs. Another issue is that the potential value of the project can only be attained at the end of the project when the system with all its defined requirements is delivered. For many projects, this could mean months and sometimes years. Agile approach came about because of the shortcomings of the waterfall approach, as we just discussed. In 2001, a group of thought leaders in software development came up with the manifesto of Agile. There are 12 principles that describe how teams can transition to Agile. They are based on four core values. The first value is that the people and interactions are more important. Not that processes and tools are not important, but people and interactions are more important. Under Agile, the development team is given autonomy to choose the best way to do the work for a given project. This requires multidisciplinary teams that are motivated, self-organizing, and able to communicate actively. Only working and testing software brings value to people and organizations. Moreover, project team members are often required to document the work they complete as a way to track the progress of the project. This is often viewed as excessive or needless documentation that consumes valuable time that could have been used more productively. Under Agile, documentation is only useful if it aids directly in the development of a working product or system. While the term user still applies as in people who use the product or system, practitioners of Agile tend to use the richer term, customer, instead. The customer is supreme, and Agile emphasizes collaboration to ensure that customers get exactly what they need. Under Agile, change can be viewed as an opportunity to improve the product or the system because new knowledge or insight can lead to new ideas and new innovations, or stop the team from going down the wrong path before it's too late. Under a more structured approach to software development, change is viewed as something that must be managed, controlled, and avoided. Under Agile, resistance to change is viewed as futile, so why fight it? Agile takes a strong customer focus, which is consistent with quality management philosophies, which we will look at later in the course. The customer could be internal, for example, the users, or external to the organization. The product or system must be developed with the customer in mind. Therefore, the customer and developers must communicate and interact effectively in order to work together collaboratively. The team should be co-located for daily face-to-face communication. So Agile approach repeats the SDLC into iterations, which are called sprints. User and developers work together to continually define and prioritize the most important or must-have features. The emphasis in Agile is to release working software. The approach is heavily based on continuous communication between users and developers through daily meetings. The term Agile today is an umbrella term that includes a number of approaches, methods, or ways to develop products or systems. Agile approaches focus on speed and flexibility rather than a rigid development structure. One version of Agile method is extreme programming, or XP. Under XP, the system is delivered to the users in a series of versions called releases. A release may be developed using several iterations that are developed and tested within a few weeks or months. Each release is a working system that includes only one or several functions that are part of the full system specification. XP includes a number of activities where the user's requirements are first documented as a user story. The user stories are often documented using an object-oriented model called class diagram. A set of acceptance tests is then developed for each user story. Releases that pass the acceptance test are then considered complete. Another Agile approach is Scrum. Under Scrum, there are three important roles: Scrum Master, Product Owner, and the Development Team. The Scrum Master is similar to the Project Manager, while the Product Owner represents the business side and ensures that the most important features are included in the product. The Development Team is responsible for delivering a quality product or system. Requirements or features are defined by the product owner, and time estimates for each feature is estimated by the entire team. The product owner then prioritizes the features that become the product backlog, which is subsequently divided into iterations called sprints. Each sprint generally takes a few weeks, and a completed product is delivered then. Additional features and functionalities are planned for the next sprint until all the features in the product backlog are delivered. Each day, the Scrum Master, Product Owner, and the development team have a short stand-up meeting called daily Scrum meetings, during which information on project progress are shared among all the key players. IT project methodology, ITPM, is essentially a methodology that provides a framework for initiating, planning, and carrying out and controlling and closing and evaluating IT projects. So pulling all of that together. The ITPM introduced in this chapter is a generic project methodology that integrates the project lifecycle, systems development lifecycle, and project management body of knowledge areas so that a set of phases, processes, and tools are defined. This allows the methodology to adopt and align with a particular organization's culture, industry, strategy, etc. over time. The phases and infrastructure of the ITPM provide a logical sequence for planning and managing an IT project. The methodology provides structure but must be flexible enough to fit or adopt a unique situation. Organizations are trying to improve quality of their system development efforts while attempting to reduce the cycle time of their projects. Subsequently, a number of approaches to implementing the SDLC have evolved. Years ago, systems were developed using waterfall approach, but this has evolved to many different approaches, including rapid application development, RAD, and the agile approaches that we talked about. When I was the CTO of US Course, the project management office reported to me. We decided to implement a more rigorous approach for managing our IT projects. We wanted to keep the process as simple as possible, but we also wanted to include all the key elements of PMBOK and other methodologies. We formalized the key roles on projects: executive sponsor, project steering group, project manager, and business owner. We held forums for executive sponsors to share their experience with each other and learn from one another. The executive sponsor usually chaired the project steering group. We required PMP certification for all project managers. We trained business owners in requirement gathering and documentation. We established 2 gates for funding projects. The first gate was at the end of the conceptual phase and would provide enough funding to complete the planning phase of the project. The second gate was at the end of the planning efforts and was for full funding of the project. The documentations were reviewed and commented by the staff from project management office, which was part of my organization. We also established a simple system for projects to report their status. Any issue they were dealing with, as well as their costs, schedule, and risks, were reported on a monthly basis. The system provided transparency to all projects because all the executives in the organization had access to this project dashboard. Furthermore, as issues were identified, various organizations could see if they were impacting a project and could address those issues. We required all systems to go through external testing, which was an organization within US Force located in Phoenix, both for functionality testing as well as security testing prior to the release to the users. So those were the key attributes of the customized ITPM that we decided to implement in US courts. Now let's talk about learning cycle. Learning cycle is a useful tool that can be applied throughout the project lifecycle, regardless of whether the project team follows a waterfall or agile approach. More specifically, learning cycles provide a way to resolve problems through the repeated pattern of thinking through the problem. An entire project can be viewed as a series of learning cycles. An initial team meeting can examine the original problem or challenge assigned to the team. During that meeting, the team can develop an initial action plan. Between meetings, the member of the team can carry out their assigned task uh, for testing the assumptions that were made or gathering new information. At the next meeting, the team can reflect on what it has learned and document the lessons learned, and then start the beginning of a new cycle to determine basically what are the unknowns that are left. Each cycle should be used to challenge the framing of the problem and create new understanding and new learning of the problem. As you face a new project, a problem or an issue, you need to first understand it. This usually entails to capture what you know, which are the facts, what you think you know, which are the hypotheses, and what you don't know, which are questions to be answered. Then you need to put together an action plan to address the unknowns. This is an example of an action plan to address the unknowns. It establishes who is responsible to get something done and establishes a deadline for getting that task done. So any project or major issue can go through several or many iterations of learning cycle. And in each cycle, more unknowns are addressed until there are no major unknowns left. As teams go through these learning cycles, the depth, speed, and breadth of their understanding increases and enables them to plan and execute projects more effectively and more efficiently. So with that, this concludes my lecture on chapter 2. Thank you.